Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, hello, I'm Saoirse, and on this channel I make videos about knitting, I make bookish content, and I also do vlogs that kind of center on either knitting, reading, or writing. So if any of that sounds interesting to you, make sure to hit the subscribe button before you go if you end up enjoying this video. So in this video, I'm going to be wrapping up all the books that I read in the month of March and in the month of April. I've got some stats for you, and obviously we're going to talk about what I thought of these books, what I rated them. If you're one of my knitting friends, I did do a similar type of video, but I had it as a knit and chat, and it's basically that video. I'm just going to be talking about the books, and if you want to treat it as a knit and chat where you knit along while you watch, feel free. So I do want to mention, I did DNF 6 books over the course of March and April. I am not including them in this video. I'm not going to talk about what I thought of them. I'm not going to talk about why I DNF'd them. I'm not even going to talk about what books they are. That just felt like too much negativity all in one video, so I don't want to try to do that. But yeah, I did want to mention that I did DNF quite a few books. Let's talk about my March stats. So in March I read 4 books. Did I say already? In April I read 5. So I have a total of 9 books to talk to you about. But for my March stats, the 4 books that I read were all ebooks. So physical copies, there were 0, audiobooks 0. 3 of these 4 books were from Kindle Unlimited. One of them was a library book, and one of them was a reread. So we'll talk about that. And all 4 of these books were part of a series, so 0 standalones in March, and all of them were authors that I have read before. I had not been doing a monthly TBR at this point, so none of these books were part of that. I mean, they were on my TBR, like my big long TBR, but they weren't like part of a monthly TBR. Average star rating was 5, 5 stars, and my rating mood, I'm gonna try and kind of include this for each month. The mood that I was sort of in while reading a lot of these books was basically just like, if I was having a good time, it was 5 stars. That's not always the case, but I was not a very extra critical Saoirse in the month of March, apparently. The first 2 books that I read in March were both part of the same series. It was books 1 and 2 from the Fate and Flame series by K.A. Tucker. So I have the first book physically. I don't own the rest of the series, but this is on Kindle Unlimited, the whole series, well, except for the 4th book, which is not out until September, I believe, of this year. But this is the first book of Fate of Wrath and Flame, and it is the Fate and Flame series, I'm pretty sure. This series follows our main character, Romeria. I don't know if I'm pronouncing her name right, but hopefully it's not too bad. But she is a thief in New York City, and she's kind of fallen in with a bad crowd. She's sort of been forced to work for this guy who's, you know, not so nice. So she ends up getting kind of like hired. I think I'm kind of blinking a little bit on the beginning of this book because I read it such a long time ago, but she's kind of like, she gets like hired by this mysterious woman, and she realizes pretty soon after that this woman is like, she's got magical powers, like she's a witch or something. I forget exactly what she is. And instead of stealing something for this mysterious woman, she ends up getting sent to a totally different realm, which is like, you know, more set in a sort of kind of more medieval type place, you know, no technology, things like that. This place has magic. And she is like mistaken for this princess who coincidentally is also named Romeria, and everybody in this kingdom is like tracking this princess down as she has just murdered the king and queen, and she was betrothed to their son, the prince, and who's now the king because his parents died, because she murdered them even though it wasn't her. But anyway, so they think that she has just murdered this king and queen, and they capture her after trying to kill her, and she is like, whoa, hold on, that wasn't me, I didn't do this. So they kind of were like, okay, are you having like, you're having amnesia, like what's going on here? So the new king, her betrothed, is kind of like, what is going on here? Like, why, what are you pretending to not remember? What game are you playing, right? But he basically, he lets her live because he's like, you know what, actually, you're actually more help to me alive. So he lets her live, and they basically continue to be, I guess, betrothed. Like, yeah. So anyways, he keeps her alive, and it is obviously, well, maybe not obvious, but it is an enemies to lovers type of thing here. I guess that's all I'll really say. I don't want to like spoil anything accidentally. So I really remember enjoying book one. And I think at the time that I read it, the other books were not out. So I kind of forgot about this series. And then I realized that, I saw it on Kindle Unlimited, and I was like, oh, what is that? And I looked at the first book and I was like, oh, I literally have that book. So I read books 2 and 3. So book 2 is A Curse of Blood and Stone, and then book 3 is A Queen of Thieves and Chaos. And let me just say, overall, this series, I really love the world building. I thought it was very unique. I felt like it was really just well done in terms of like how much world building we get. Like it's in depth without being over the top. And I felt like, the, I guess, focus on kind of the romance plot versus kind of everything else that is going on was a really good mixture. I would kind of say like, I would kind of classify this more as like a fantasy romance more than a romantasy, if that makes sense. Like I think you kind of argue like I don't know, like the fantasy like plot that it has nothing to do with the romance could hold its own without the romance, and vice versa. So like, I don't know, to me it's kind of, it's a little bit more than just your average romantasy where like the plot maybe might not be as strong or the world building might not be as strong. So I really am enjoying the series. This is a series where I've been giving it 5 stars, I'm pretty sure. I don't remember what I rated the first book, but the second and third one I gave both 5 stars. I'm really, really enjoying it. However, the fourth book has everything rests on the fourth book. The way that the fourth book, whatever happens in the final book is really going to make me either love this series so much or potentially hate it or potentially be very disappointed. So a lot is resting on this fourth book. There's something in the series that I very badly want to have happen, and I don't know if I'm going to get the ending that I want, and that makes me nervous for the fourth book. But I'm very excited. I would say if you're like, maybe wait until a little bit closer to September if you want to like binge read, right? But if you don't mind waiting a little bit, I would definitely recommend reading the series, and then maybe you have some time to kind of digest it maybe before that fourth book comes out. But yeah, it depends on how much, like, there's, cliffhangers and all that, so I don't know, up to you. But I would definitely recommend it if you're looking for a good fantasy romance or romantasy. The next book that I read in March was Two Twisted Crowns, which is the second book in the Shepherd King duology. This is the one that I got from the library. It is not available on Kindle Unlimited, and I don't have a physical copy of either of the Shepherd King books. This book is by Rachel Gillig, and I loved it. Again, 5 stars. I really enjoyed the first book. I gave that one 5 stars as well. One Dark Window. One Dark Window, so, because I don't want to talk, like, if I talk about the second book, I could spoil things for the first book, so, like, that's why I'm, like, talking about the first books so much in these series. One Dark Window, you are introduced to Elspeth, who is the main character, and she came down with a fever that kind of plagues this town of Blunder that she lives in, and when people get this fever, they are often, if they are reported, they're taken away and killed. And those who survive the fever, you know, if the fever doesn't kill them, they end up being killed by like the crown basically, because they don't want it to spread. And Elspeth, though, has been hidden by her family, so no one found out except for her family members that she had the fever. And if you do survive the fever and you happen to not be killed later on because you had the fever, most people develop like magical abilities. And pretty much to everyone else's knowledge, Elspeth has not developed any magical abilities from the fever. However, as you can tell from reading her point of view, she has a monster like in her, like a voice. This like monstrous being that she has inside of her like talks to her, kind of talks in riddles. Sometimes he's helping her out. Sometimes he's kind of lending her strength or like helping her get out of situations. Also in this town of Blender, it's basically surrounded by these magical mists, and if you go out into the mist unprotected, you basically turn crazy and are never seen again. And then in this town of Blender, there are what are called provenance cards, which are very tarot inspired, though as someone who reads tarot and is pretty familiar with tarot decks, it does not follow like the typical Rider-Waite-Smith deck or any deck that I have seen. It is kind of like, you know, it has 78 cards, which is the same as a traditional tarot deck, but the way that it's constructed is not actually tarot, but you can definitely kind of tell that there is some inspiration taken from that, and these cards can allow you to do magic. So for example, there's a card where you can turn invisible. There's a card that gives you beauty. There is a card that I think makes you like stronger or faster or something like that. But all of these cards, if you use them too long, they start to have negative side effects. And so, you know, you have to be very careful. And that's kind of a huge theme throughout this, is like when you're using the magic in any form in this world, there's always going to be like a drawback or a price to pay. The world building, the magic system, I thought was super intriguing. It was really fun, and I really enjoyed it. It's very imaginative and creative and not anything that I've really seen before. Book 2 kind of follows a little bit of a quest that they go on, and really I think expands on our cast of characters. There is a secondary romance in this duology that I actually ended up liking more than the main romance. I do think I did enjoy the second book even more so than the first book, but I liked both of them. I rated both of them 5 stars, and I would definitely recommend this series. Don't really know what else to say. I mean, the writing was beautifully written. It's, you know, kind of poetic without being flowery or like purple prose or too ornate or like, you know, just gross. And there's little poems at the beginning of each chapter, and the riddles that Elspeth's monster kind of speaks in is really well done. So I think that this author is very talented in that regards. I really enjoyed her writing style. So then the last book I read in March was my reread that I did, and this was honestly because at the time I think I had just DNF'd so many books, and I was like, I just want a book that I know that I'm going to be able to like get into, and I knew that in April the last Zodiac Academy book was coming out, so I was like, yeah, I'm gonna reread the whole series. I did not do that, but I did reread the first book, which is what's it called? The Awakening, and this is by Caroline Peckham and Susan Valenti. And I think, yeah, I'm pretty sure I talked about this in my May TBR, because that was on my May TBR, was reading the 9th book. I will save my thoughts on the 9th book for my May wrap-up video, but just speaking solely on the first book, I really enjoyed it. I had originally rated it 4 stars. When I reread it, I changed it to a 5-star because I was just like, I love the series so much and I want to just up my rating. Yeah, I remember I kind of felt like the first book, like I do remember when I first read it, it was like, wow, that ended slightly abruptly. Like I was expecting a little bit more, but at the same time, I thought it was after having read the series, I now like the first book a lot better where it ended, but if you're unfamiliar, Zodiac Academy follows twins Darcy and Tori, and at the beginning of book 1 you are introduced to them as they are living in Chicago, I'm pretty sure, in the, in our world, and they are really struggling. Like, it's not even trying to make ends meet, like they are barely even able to put food on the table. First thing Darcy's up to is she is breaking into the home of their former foster care person who kicked them out as soon as they turned 18, and they weren't able to get all of their stuff from his house, and they had left money there. So Darcy breaks in to get that money back. And as she is escaping with the money and trying to run from police, this mysterious guy shows up. She's able to get away from the police, but she loses the money. And then it switches to Tori's point of view, and she's, I think, yeah, like stealing motorcycles. And again, this mysterious guy shows up and is trying to talk to her, and she's like, get away from me. And so anyways, this mysterious guy ends up following Tori back to Tori and Darcy's apartment and kind of forces his way in, and he's like, hey, so actually you are these long lost princesses from the Fae realm, you need to come back with me and enroll in Zodiac Academy. And they're like, what have you been smoking? And he's like, I'm not on drugs, I promise you, like, this is an actual thing. And if you come with me and you graduate from Zodiac Academy, you will get your inheritance. Your parents were the king and queen, they had a lot of money, you'll get your inheritance. And while you're at Zodiac Academy, you get a stipend or whatever. And then like Tori's like, huh, money? We get money if we go with you? Like, okay, sign us up. So they go with this random ass guy who magically teleports them to Zodiac Academy, and their magic is awakened, and they're like, oh wow, you were actually telling the truth. And he's like, yeah. So anyways, I think it's a good time. Is it the most well-written books ever? No, they're kind of a little cheesy at times. But overall, I really enjoy the characters in this series. And not to spoil my May wrap-up video, now that the series has ended, I'm not as like, I would still recommend the series. I still think it's a good time, but like it does kind of, towards the end of the series, it gets a little crazy, and I'm not super invested towards the end of the series. But overall, they're some of my favorite romantasy characters, and I had a really good time with the series. So kind of overall, I would still recommend it. But I did reread that in March, and it was a good time. Oh, and oh my gosh, I have the book. I realized I literally could have been showing you the book the whole time because I have it. So that wraps up March. So let's go ahead and go into April. So I'm gonna kind of read off my stats for April. Again, I read 5 books in the month of April. Of those 5, 4 of them were ebooks. 1 was a physical book. 0 were audiobooks. 4 of them were Kindle Unlimited books. 0 were library books. 0 were rereads. Let's see, 4 of them were part of a series. 1 was a standalone. 0 of them were authors that I had read before April. And so 4 of these authors were new to me because it was only 2 of them were from the same author. So collectively in April, I only read 4 authors, but 5 books, if that makes sense. And like I said, for March, I did not have, and for April, I did not have a monthly TBR. So none of these books were on a monthly TBR. The average star rating I gave in April was a 3.8, and my rating mood was slightly more critical, but still, you know, wanting to give out as many 5 stars as I could, but being a little bit more critical. So let's start with the first book that I read in the month of April, which was Spark of the Everflame by Penn Cole. Now, this book I originally DNF'd. I was reading it and I got like a couple chapters in, and I was there was a scene that just felt like way too convenient, like kind of just felt like, you know, like there's like this psychic woman or something, and she randomly shows up and like tells our main character like to do something, and I don't know, it just felt like too convenient. It felt like a little bit of lazy writing, I don't know. So, and I had just been through it these past couple of months with books. I just felt like I had a lot of good reads, but I also kept getting, like, it was either 5 stars or like DNFing books was basically where I was at. And I think that I just I had to come back to this book in a little bit of a better mood. So I did end up deciding to give it another shot because I kept hearing people talk about the Kindred's Curse saga on BookTube, and I was like, okay, man, so many people are saying it's such a good series. I should give it a second chance. So I did, and then I started really enjoying it. Like by the end of the book, I was like, oh my gosh, I can't believe that I almost DNF'd this. Like, that's crazy. But in Spark of the Everflame, we are introduced to the main character, Diem, who is a mortal living in this world where I kind of forget exactly how it's like laid out in like a circle or something. And each segment is kind of ruled by these different types of descended. And descended are basically these like half gods, half mortal, like gods and mortals had children, and those are the descended, right? And then you have like mortals who are just, you know, your average human. So descended have magic, they're immortal, and then you have humans basically. And Diem is working as a healer with her mother in kind of the mortal area of the city. However, her mother has gone missing, and in her place, Diem has to go to the palace, which is basically, you know, where the descended are, and she has to do healing work there. And her mother had this deal with the descended where if she was the palace healer, her son would get to go to a descended school instead of a mortal one. So he's getting a better education, and Diem is worried that if she doesn't take over that responsibility, they'll kick her brother out of this school. So she kind of goes in her mother's place, and there she meets Prince Luther, who is obviously our love interest, and I won't say anything else. I gave the first book 5 stars, and then I also ended up reading Glow of the Everflame, which is the second book in the series. I started taking notes on books as I was kind of reading. So Glow of the Everflame was like, Spark of the Everflame was, I think, like a solid 5 stars. Glow of the Everflame was more like a 4.5 stars, but I rounded up to 5 stars. And I really liked, there's kind of an inner circle group of characters that I really loved in the second book. The tension between Diem and Luther is amazing in the second book. The end felt a little weak in the second book. It wasn't, in my opinion, as strong. I felt like the author was really trying to add a lot of tension, as if like maybe the author didn't think that the end of this book was like enough. Like it wasn't like climactic enough or something, but it would have been. But because she tried to add in more tension, it kind of like, it just didn't, it ended up feeling a little bit flatter. It ended up kind of being a little bit unsatisfying. So overall, it didn't really affect my enjoyment of the book. I still really, really loved it, and so therefore I went with 5 stars on Goodreads. Yeah, I'm having a great time with this series. I will definitely be continuing, and if you're wondering if you should pick it up, I think you absolutely should. They're both available. The whole series is available on Kindle Unlimited. The 4th book is coming out June 1st, and I believe will also be on Kindle Unlimited. So I would definitely recommend. And then the next book that I read, so my friend was watching, I think she was watching Jess from Honest Fiction, and was reading a lot of books that she's been recommending on her channel. My friend texted me after she finished this book and was like, oh my gosh, you have to read this. So I was like, of course I will. Like, let me pick it up right now. It's on Kindle Unlimited. And so I read Order of Scorpions by Ivy Asher, and this is a dark romance wide shoes reverse harem book. So this book follows our main character. What's her name's Osset, I believe. I don't know if I'm pronouncing it right, but she is basically, the very beginning of the book, she wakes up in like a cell, like she's in a dungeon. She has no memory of who she is. She doesn't know her name. She doesn't know anything about how she got there. She knows literally nothing. She has like 0 memories. There's kind of a sort of, I think chapter 1 is more sort of kind of like a prologue, and then it like just changes, and it's like 6 years later. And so basically she's been kidnapped, but we don't know why or where she came from, but she ends up as what's called a blade slave. So she's basically being kept at this place that trains these slaves to be assassins. which I feel like I've read a couple books lately where like these evil people are like oppressing people but also teaching them how to be extremely lethal, and I'm like, why would you think that that's a good thing? Why that doesn't make sense to me. Why would you help the people you're oppressing get their revenge on you? That's not smart. I mean, I guess like karma's getting them because they shouldn't be oppressing people, but like just seems like these villains aren't very smart. I don't know. So that premise was kind of a little like, I don't know, but whatever. I looked past it. And so anyways, she has been training to be an assassin, and she has been waiting for what is called the bidding, which is when all of these orders of assassins come to this place and they bid on these slaves, and that time has come and she is like, great, I'm finally going to get out of here. And her goal is basically to kind of coast through the middle. She is trying to she doesn't want any of these orders to bid too high on her, because basically in order to get her freedom, she has to work for this, like whatever order bids highest on her, she has to work for them for as long as it takes her to pay back how much they bid on her, basically. And at that point, then she will be free and she can either keep being an assassin or she can do whatever the fuck she wants. So her goal is to coast through the middle so that she is not bid too highly on, but so that she does get bid on. It's a dark book, okay? It's got a lot of dark themes. So if you're not into dark romance, I would not recommend this book for you. Anyways, so the bidding starts, right? Or like this event where they're gonna kind of show off these slaves and these orders of assassins are gonna bid on them. So it's starting, and unfortunately, of course, a wrench gets thrown into Ossette's plans, and she basically realizes that no matter what she does, she is not gonna be free of this place. Like, there's someone kind of out to get her, and she realizes like she's not gonna be walking out of this bidding alive. So she kind of throws caution to the wind and starts just acting out, being kind of rebellious, which actually catches the attention of the Order of Scorpions, of course. I had a lot of thoughts on this book. I rated it 3 stars. The first issue I had with it was that it just was overly wordy and descriptive when it didn't need to be. For example, I remember in the beginning, like, Ossette is kind of like thinking about how much her head hurts, and there's like 3 different sentences about how much her head hurts, and it's like, okay, I get it, like, you don't need to tell me that many times that this character's head is hurting, like, I get it. And there's a lot of just paragraphs and paragraphs of inner dialogue. It's very repetitive, and you'll have characters like having a conversation and there'll be like 1 line of dialogue and then 3 paragraphs of like internal dialogue about how that character thinks about what this other character just said. And then they'll reply to that character, and then it's like 3 more paragraphs about, you know, talking about, like, thinking about what they just said. So it was just too much internal dialogue, and this book is really long. It's way longer than it needs to be. This is a standalone, so I was thankful that it was not a series, but it was way too long. Also, because it is a dark romance, I feel like you kind of run that risk of the love interests, or yes, love interests, plural, not being necessarily redeemable. I didn't really ever feel connected to any of them. I did not ever really get to a point where I even really liked any of their characters. I didn't ever really feel connected to Ossette. Again, didn't really love her character either. I just never like connected with them in the book, really. Also, the characters in the Order of Assassins are given code names. And so in the beginning of the book, you're introduced to one of them is Scorpius, and then the other are Bones and Skull. And Bones and Skull are way too similar where I couldn't really tell them apart. And even when I learned their real names, like later on in the book, I still couldn't remember like which one was which. And I just felt like that was a little bit confusing. And I think the biggest issue that I had with this book is that all 3 of the guys were way too similar. They all kind of had the same personality, and I felt like their dynamic with the main character wasn't different enough to really like warrant this being a reverse harem. Like it just didn't, I don't know, I just didn't really enjoy that part of it. And it was, they kind of all fall for her at the same time, and she ends up falling for them all at the same time. So there's no like staggering of relationships where like one is a slow burn and one's a little bit quicker, or like friends to lovers or something like that. So it just didn't click for me. I just wasn't a huge fan. I did give it a 3-star rating just because, you know, for a bit there I was enjoying myself. When I got to the end, I started skimming, to be completely honest, because like I said, it was way too much internal dialogue. And I also really lost interest in the kind of secondary plot arc of Osset trying to figure out who she is and where she comes from. And when I did find that out at the end of the book, I was like, wow, that was super anticlimactic. Like, I don't care about any of this. I will say, I think that this author does have a talent for writing spicy scenes. I will say that. So I could definitely understand why a lot of people would love this book, and I would be open to reading more books from her. I just think that this one was just a bit too long, and it didn't have the necessary setup, and it just didn't execute on things super well, in my opinion. So overall, like, I'm glad that I read it, but at the same time, it did fall flat for me. So I gave it a 3-star because it was like, I didn't hate reading it, but it felt like it had a lot of issues. The next book I read, I have a physical copy of. This is Fortuna Sworn by KJ Sutton. I don't know if I'm saying the name right. I don't know if it's Fortuna or Fortuna, because it's supposed to be like fortune, right? So I think Fortuna, not Fortuna, because then I just think of the fish. But anyways, this book follows Fortuna Sworn, and she is a kind of a rare type of fae. She's what's called a nightmare, and she can basically cause people to think that they are like living their worst fears. Her brother has disappeared a couple years ago, and she's been searching for him ever since. The book starts out with her being basically in a cage and about to be auctioned off to the highest bidder. So in this world, there are some humans who kind of know about fae and will want to use, like, I think it's like if they cut out her heart and they have her heart, they are, I think it grants them like courage or something like that. And like there's other faes, and if you get certain body parts from them, like you get other magical abilities or something like that. So mortals will sometimes try to, you know, catch fae and use them for that. So right off the bat, she's kind of in a little bit of a pickle, but with the help of a mysterious fae, she is able to get free of this auction, and she returns to her normal day-to-day life where she works as a bartender and then tries to use in her free time, tries to figure out what happened to her brother. And of course, this mysterious fae keeps showing up, and eventually she strikes a deal with him. I didn't like this book. I gave it a 2-star rating because I really reserve my 1 stars for when I feel like a book is really problematic, like, you know, just really dislike it. I was kind of in a phase where I was not giving out 2 stars because it felt like, I don't know, it felt too mean or something, but I've kind of changed my mind about that, and you know, I'm giving 2 stars out now. Not often, but they're gonna happen occasionally. But this is a 2-star read for me. When I first started reading this book, I was like intrigued. It kind of started off, it was kind of, you know, quick pace. I was seeing tropes that I enjoyed, but overall, I think that's pretty much what it was just a book of tropes that were not executed well. The pacing ended up being way too fast and kind of repetitive in a weird way, where like every chapter sort of ended on something that's supposed to make you go like, oh my gosh, and like turn the next page, and it felt like after a while kind of felt like a cheap trick of the author to get you to keep reading, and I didn't really appreciate that. Honestly, this book is just basically, if you've read ACOTAR, if you just take the scenes from Under the Mountain, if you know, you know, that's what this book was, but not in a good way. It just kind of felt like a ripoff, honestly, of ACOTAR, to be completely honest with you. And there was no chemistry between our main character and the love interest. And then there also were like other love interests. I don't know why they were there. This book was not long enough for there to be multiple love interests, but it's not. I don't believe this is supposed to be a reverse harem or waichu, so it just was, I don't know. I felt weird about that. I felt like that was kind of just a weird thing to include. I wasn't really sure what the direction of the book was. This book had zero direction in terms of plot. I thought that this book would be about her and this love interest trying to find her brother and then like get him back. It's not what it ends up being, really. Like in a roundabout, indirect way, kind of yes, but not at the same time. So yeah, I will be unhauling this book. I definitely am not going to reread it. It is a series also, which is kind of crazy to me because I just didn't feel like it had enough to like warrant more books than that. But it does leave on a little bit of a cliffhanger, but like it just wasn't enough to really pique my interest. And yeah, so I will not be continuing with this series, and I wouldn't really recommend it. If you've read this book, I would love to hear your thoughts on it. Which leads me to my last book that I read in April, which was The Marionettes by Katie Wismer. And I will just preface this by saying that I follow Katie on AuthorTube, so I will leave her YouTube channel link down below if you're a writer who wants to see kind of the behind the scenes of an indie self-published author. I really enjoy her videos, and I really overall enjoyed this book. I've kind of gone back and forth on whether I would like officially rate it a 3.5 or a 4-star. And the thing that really comes down to it, I think I'm gonna go with 4 stars because I just really enjoyed it. Overall, it had some issues, but I really enjoyed it. So The Marionettes is about our main character, Valerie, who is a blood witch. So she can kind of like use her blood to like cast spells and do magic and stuff. And she is, at the beginning of the book, she is about to start the initiation process into the Marionettes. So it's kind of an academy type setting. I honestly got really big Vampire Academy vibes from the first book a little bit because these witches that are entering the Marionettes get bonded with vampires and like paired with them, and they're supposed to kind of protect them and like help them out and all that stuff. So it kind of gave Vampire Academy, but like it is an adult series, it is a spicy series. So yeah, Valerie's like initiation trials are about to begin, and the first book kind of follows her as she is going through those trials. And of course there are larger things afoot, and at the beginning of the book also her magic is going all kind of haywire. Like she is not been able to heal herself like she normally is. She's not able to cast like these stronger spells that kind of require more of her power. She's been, you know, not kind of feeling her best, and she's trying to also figure out what the heck is happening there. The first thing that I kind of will say that I felt like was a kind of a good thing, but also kind of ended up being a little bit of a con for me, was that I felt like, so that at no point in this book was there any info dumping, which I really appreciated. Like Katie is really good at giving you details, like really truly world building, not like world dumping, like I'm just gonna give you all these facts and then we'll get into the story. Like she is really good at kind of easing you into it, but I did feel like I missed some integral pieces of information, and I wasn't sure if I just kind of was reading and maybe like I spaced out and didn't put 2 and 2 together or something, or if it wasn't as clear as it could have been. So it could have been a me issue. Why aren't the witches in power? Like why are the vampires in power? Not sure. That those questions, because I have read I'm not going to talk about it in this video because it's for my May wrap up, but I did read the second book in the series and I feel like those questions are being answered, so I'm okay with that. And then the last kind of issue I guess I would have with it is that the kind of ending and like the plot, like at times it sort of just felt like things were happening to Valerie and we're just kind of getting her like reactions, and that's what's pushing the like plot forward, is just random things happening, and less of like, okay, this thing happened and then I'm now making a choice and then that pushes the plot forward. And so it felt a little like kind of like I'm not sure. A little confusing, a little rushed at times, but like I don't know, overall I still had a really good time reading it, and the way that it ended was very I guess like satisfying, because it was like kind of a cliffhanger, but kind of like a I kind of saw this coming, so like I don't know if that makes sense, like it was a satisfying ending. The main thing I want to mention is like, and I think one of the reasons that I'm loving Katie's writing so much is like I'm really big on dialogue. I love, like if a book does not have good dialogue, I usually end up DNFing it. Like I gotta have me some good dialogue, and Katie Wismer knows how to write good banter, okay? The banter between the between Valerie and her love interest is really good, and I feel like in the second book it gets even better. Like it's amazing. And then the banter between Valerie and her two best friends, Monroe and Kirby, I loved it. I felt like Katie did such an amazing, just an incredible job of writing that friend trio. You like, there's just these small details that she throws in that like just really paint this picture that they've been friends for a really long time and they have all this like, you know, this past with each other and they really know each other. And the dialogue between them is just so wonderful. There was one scene where her friends were like really overreacting to something, and at first it made me really annoyed because I was like, what, that's not realistic. But then I was like, actually that is kind of realistic, because they're basically like, we're not gonna be your friend anymore if you keep acting like this. And she's like, Valerie's like, guys, like I literally just saw a dead body, can you please chill? And they're like, oh my god, we had no idea. And so it was kind of like over the top, but at the same time, like I was like, I actually could see that happening between friends, you know, so I don't know, it actually ended up kind of feeling more realistic, even though at first I thought it wasn't. But anyways, I just really overall really enjoyed the book. I kind of took a star off just because there were, you know, there were some issues here and there, and as far as like the first book in the series go, I felt like it could have been stronger, but it was still really got me into the series. I'm liking the characters, I'm liking the writing style, and I want more, and I did actually really end up liking the second book. So I have high hopes for this series and I would definitely recommend it. It is on Kindle Unlimited. If you have Kindle Unlimited, I would definitely recommend checking it out. So that is it for my March and April reading wrap up. Those were all the books that I read in March and April and what I thought of them, and I hope that you enjoyed this video. Please let me know if you've read any of these books and what you thought of them, and if you haven't read them, are there any that I mentioned that you want to read? Please let me know. And I would love to hear if you guys have any did you have any 5-star reads the past couple of months that you would recommend for me? If you have any recommendations in general for me, let me know. If you did end up enjoying this video, please make sure to give it a thumbs up before you go. And if you want to leave me a comment but you don't know, you don't maybe have anything you really want to say, go ahead and put like a vampire emoji in the comments, because that's the last book that we talked about, was the marionettes. It has to do with vampires, so you can do like vampire emoji or maybe like a drop of blood or something. Or something like that. Do they have that emoji? I think so. But yeah, and other than that, I hope you're having a wonderful time with your reading, and I hope to see you back here in another one of my videos soon. Have an amazing rest of your day. Bye!
Alright, this is a song that I wrote about falling too fast, but I wouldn't know anything about that.
I don't wanna lose my grounding, so you catch me not responding. And I press my lips together so you don't find any answer.